Major offensive in Afghanistan offends many as US troops withdraw from Iraq. Experts say Michael Jackson is still dead and leaves all his debt to his children. US jobless figures worse than expected, many people still working. Fiscal emergency in California, Arnold Schwarzenegger can't count. World condemns leaders of banana republics, business writes them a check. In the UK, great train robber Biggs refused parole cause he's still a bit cocky. Hello economic slaves, welcome to the fucking news. I'm hardly breathing. Here are the headlines tonight. The US Army says it has launched a major offensive against the Taliban in South Afghanistan's Helmand province. About 4,000 Marines as well as 650 Afghan troops are involved, supported by NATO murderers, warplanes. A Taliban spokesman said, "We're very offended by the offensive. You're still killing us because we didn't hand over Osama bin Laden? For fuck's sake, you people really hold a grudge, don't you? Jeez, give it up. It was a long time ago. Don't you have other things to do? It's not like we all attacked you, is it? Huh, so our leader at the time was an asshole. Yours was too, but we're not holding it against you." In a totally related story, 6 years after the lies about weapons of mass destruction led to the invasion of Iraq and the assassination toppling of Saddam, Iraqi troops are assuming control of their own insecurity as US combat forces withdraw from urban centres to camps just up the road a bit. In Iraq, commentators are optimistic that Iraqis will manage to be bombed to death by warring ethnic and religious factions on their own, without a US presence, but warned of other challenges to security, without mentioning the CIA blowing things up and blaming it on Iran. Security duties have formally been handed over to new Iraqi forces, a public holiday has been declared, and the capital Baghdad held a giant party to, despite the pullback US troops still occupy, will be embedded in Iraq. More on that story later. Much of the world's news for the last week has been dedicated to the fact that Michael Jackson is still dead. Many experts in death have stated he will remain dead and that resurrection is extremely unlikely unless it turns out he is either the Antichrist or the Second Coming. In his will, which has been filed in a Los Angeles court, he leaves his entire debt to his family. Nice. The singer who died last week also stipulates his body is to be melted down and turned into toys, so children can play with him for a change. Meanwhile, figures show Jackson had the 3 top-selling US albums last week, each shifting more than 100,000 copies. His record company is said to be overjoyed, devastated by his death. In other news, the number of jobs lost in the US last month came in at 467,000. Which was much lower than had been expected. Since the start of the recession in December 2000, the number of jobless people has risen by 7.2 million. The Department of Labour went on not to say, "The job market's terrible. It's as bad as we've seen in our lifetime. But it's not going to be enough if we want to save the planet. I'm calling on all gainfully employed people to go home and give up their jobs. Just try it for a while. Think of the trees you'll be saving. The light at the end of the tunnel is that the recession may be longer and deeper than predicted. But don't wait for it. Go home now. Stop working, stop shopping, and everything will be much better, much sooner." In a related story, the governor of California has declared a fiscal emergency in the US state to address a budget deficit of some $24 billion. California has been one of the US states hardest hit by the recession, and the move comes after state legislators missed a July deadline to approve a budget. Many people claim Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger caused the emergency because he can't count.
"These stories are outrageous. I have a large staff of very clever people who count for me. Also, I can count with the help of my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive. 6, 7,
We'll come back to that story later. Leaders of banana republics have tried many ways to hang on to power over the years. Coups, rigged elections, military force, and others. But now it seems other countries, apart from America, are getting in on the act. The newly installed government of Honduras rejected international calls to restore ousted President Manuel Zelaya. Elections in Guinea-Bissau to replace assassinated President Joe Bernardo are set to go to a second round, and Nigeria's President Muhammadu Tanja has undermined a decade of good government in his attempts to stay in power beyond the legal limit by dissolving the Constitutional Court and a parliament in his bid for a third term. While democratic governments decry this behaviour and publicly distance themselves from the regimes, Western corporations enjoy nothing more than writing big cheques to these tin pot dictators, securing Nigeria's oil reserves for peanuts, Honduran tax havens for a song, and a handy trans-Europe drug port in Guinea-Bissau for CIA, organised crimes cocaine shipments, by dissolving the Constitutional Court and a parliament in his bid for a third term. While democratic governments decry this behaviour and publicly distance themselves from the regimes, Western corporations enjoy nothing more than writing big cheques to these tin pot dictators, securing Nigeria's oil reserves for peanuts, Honduran tax havens for a song, and a handy trans-Europe drug port in Guinea-Bissau for CIA, organised crimes cocaine shipments. Great train robber Ronnie Biggs is set to die in jail. Appeal against the government's decision to refuse him parole. Justice Secretary Jack Straw rejected recommendations by the parole board which backed the release of Biggs. Straw said Biggs had flouted the authority of the country. Biggs had chosen not to obey the rules, law, and tried to avoid the consequences of his actions. In announcing his decision on Wednesday, he said, MPs fiddling millions of pounds in expenses is nothing like a group of people pinching someone else's money. I'm more than happy for MPs to get off scot-free for being thieving scum, while I use this old robber for political capital. Mr. Biggs, who cannot speak, move, eat or swallow or walk as a result of several strokes, didn't say, "Fuck off, you hypocritical tosser." Thanks, and now the weather. A heatwave in the UK has failed to kill many people, though the Met Office has raised its heatwave alert level as hot and humid conditions look set to continue until Friday. It has cautioned people not to expect it to last or to herald the end of the world as we know it through rising sea levels and catastrophic drought. Have a nice weekend.